welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zooming in on something pretty specific in the car world, the global starter relay market.
Yeah, it sounds niche, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
But stick with us because looking at these kinds of markets is, well, it's a great shortcut, actually. It helps you understand the bigger economic stuff happening globally.
Absolutely. It's like, checking one small part to get a feel for the whole engine's health, and we've got some solid numbers to work with today.
We do. Detailed market data from cognitive market research
Mm-hmm.
gives us revenue forecasts all the way out to 2033.
Right.
So our plan is basically to unpack this data, see what it tells us about where this market is now, where it's headed globally and regionally, and pull out the really interesting bits, the trends hidden in the numbers.
And maybe just quickly explain what a starter relay is for anyone wondering.
Good point.
It's essentially a small electric switch, a crucial one. It connects your ignition to the starter motor, lets the engine crank over. You need it for, well, pretty much any car with a traditional engine. So tracking its market tells you a lot about those kinds of vehicles.
Exactly. Okay, so let's start big picture, global view. What does the cognitive market research data say? Back in 2021, the total global market, it was worth just over $2.57 billion.
Mm-hmm. And the forecasts, they show a pretty steady rise. By 2025, it's expected to be just over $3 billion.
And fast forward again to 2033, that number jumps up quite a bit, over $4.26 billion.
So if you average that out, the overall global growth rate, the CGR, comes in at 4.3%.
That's 4.3%.
Yeah. So, globally, it's consistent growth, positive. It's not setting the world on fire, maybe, but it's definitely moving up.
Right, steady as she goes on the global level.
Huh.
But things usually get more complicated when you look closer, don't they?
Always.
Region by region. This is where the story often gets, well, a lot more interesting. The dynamics change.
Absolutely. That regional breakdown in the source, that's where you really see what's happening. Should we start with North America?
Yeah, let's. It was the biggest market in 2021, value-wise. Came in at over $805 million.
Right. And the projection for 2025 is nearly $948 million, heading towards $1.32 billion by 2033.
So the regional CGR there.
It's a solid 4.237%. Very, very close to that global average we just mentioned.
Okay. And within North America?
Well, the data clearly shows the U.S. is the main player, makes up a big chunk of that regional value. And its growth rate, 4.613% CAGR, is actually pulling that regional average up slightly.
Oh, okay.
Canada and Mexico, they're significant too, of course, but their CGRs are a bit lower, around 3.5% and 3.4% respectively, according to the forecast.
So North America, big, established, growing steadily, makes sense.
Pretty much sums it up.
Okay, let's hop over to Europe. What's the picture there? The source puts the 2021 market at $688 million.
Mm-hmm. And projected to grow to over $1.04 billion by 2033. The regional CAGR there is 3.746%.
So a little bit slower than North America, but still decent growth.
Yeah, still solid. Europe's always a mixed bag, though, isn't it? Lots of different economies. The data mentions Germany, obviously a huge auto hub, growing at about 3.9%.
Right.
But interestingly, the source notes countries like Italy, it's actually got a higher CAGR at 4.293%. And Russia, Spain, even Luxembourg are all listed with growth rates slightly above that regional average.
Huh. So not entirely uniform. What about places like the UK or France?
They're listed with slightly slower growth in this data set, more in the 3.3% to 3.6% range. So yeah, a mix of paces across Europe, but generally fits that pattern of, established markets, moderate growth.
Okay, makes sense. Now, Asia-Pacific, massive manufacturing center, huge population. What's the data say there?
Right, so Asia-Pacific started at over $635 million in 2021. The forecast takes it to nearly $980 million by 2033. And the regional CAGR, 3.816%.
Very similar to Europe's overall rate.
Exactly. It puts it firmly in that solid, consistent growth category. China and Japan are the big players by value, naturally. Japan was slightly larger in 2021 based on this data.
In their growth rates?
China is listed with a KGR of 4.132%, Japan at 3.944%. Pretty strong.
Okay.
But what I found particularly interesting in the Asia-Pacific numbers, you see slightly faster growth coming from places like India. Its AGR is 4.19%. And Taiwan, actually the source, gives it the highest individual CGR in the region, 4.28%.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And Southeast Asia as a whole segment is also strong, 4.161%. So it suggests,
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
as a whole segment is also strong, 4.161%. So it suggests, some real hot spots emerging within that generally mature regional picture.
Good point. Okay, let's head south. South America, how does it stack up?
South America. The data shows a market value over $185 million in 2021, projected to hit nearly $300 million by 2033.
And the growth rate?
The regional CGR is 4.097%, so a little bit healthier than Europe and APAC's average, getting closer to the global number.
Okay. And who's leading the charge there? Brazil, I assume.
Well, Brazil's the largest market listed, yes, but its growth rate, 3.758% CAGR, is actually below the regional average, according to this data.
Oh, so who's pulling it up?
The data points to Argentina at 4.7%, Colombia at 4.5%, and Peru around 4.6%. They're showing noticeably faster growth and really boosting that regional average.
Oh, fascinating how that works. Okay, 2 regions left. The Middle East.
Middle East. Smaller market overall, just under $108 million in 2021, forecasted to reach over $171 million by 2033, and the regional CAGR is 4.011%.
So, again, pretty close to that global average mark.
Right around there. Saudi Arabia is listed as the biggest market in the source. Steady growth. Qatar shows a slightly higher individual CAGR at 4.134%.
Anything else stand out?
Well, the rest of Middle East category actually has the highest KGR listed for that region, 4.81%. So, again, suggest growth happening maybe outside the most commonly cited economies there.
Okay. Which brings us to the last region, and you flagged this one earlier, Africa.
Yes. This is really where the data shows something, well, dramatically different. So the African market started at just over $151 million in 2021. Which, is smaller than some others. But look at the projection. Over $248 million by 2025, and then it really takes off.
Right.
Projected over $445 million by 2033.
Wow, okay. That's a big jump from $151 million.
It really is. And here's the kicker.
Yeah.
That growth translates to a regional CAGR of 7.579% over the forecast period.
7.58%.
Almost 7.6%. Compare that to the global 4.3% or the sort of 3-4% range we saw elsewhere.
It's nearly double. Africa's growing almost twice as fast in this market, according to this data. That's huge.
It absolutely stands out. And the specific countries listed in the source back this up. Nigeria and South Africa, major economies there, have CGRs over 7% themselves, 7.44% and 7.3% respectively.
Wow.
And guess what? The rest of Africa segment, it actually shows the highest CGR in the entire data set we've looked at. 7.896%.
Incredible.
So yeah, this data strongly points towards Africa being a region of really rapid expansion, at least when it comes to demand for this kind of automotive component.
Yeah. Okay, wow. Let's try and tie this all together then. We've gone through the numbers region by region thanks to this cognitive market research data. What's the bigger story it's telling us about starter relays and maybe more broadly?
Well, I think it paints a picture of steady overall global growth, right? That 4.3% CAGR. And that's largely supported by these big established markets, North America, Europe, parts of Asia Pacific. They contribute a lot of the revenue, and they're growing consistently, if not spectacularly.
Right. Consistent base.
Exactly. But the data also clearly shows that the real acceleration, the faster growth, seems to be shifting towards emerging markets. We saw hints in South America, parts of the Middle East, and Asia.
But most dramatically in Africa.
Most dramatically in Africa, yes. That huge 7.579% CAGR there is the undeniable highlight in this data set. It strongly suggests there are underlying factors really driving up demand for components like starter relays on the continent.
And based on what a starter relay does, that could mean more cars being bought, or maybe more focus on maintenance, the aftermarket. Could even be manufacturing shifts.
It could imply any or all of those things, yeah. Growth in vehicle ownership, expansion of the service industry, maybe even local assembly or production picking up. These numbers essentially give you a quantifiable peek into those broader economic and industrial shifts happening regionally.
So what does this all mean for you, listening? This deep dive using the cognitive market research data shows this starter relay market growing steadily overall, but with Africa projected to grow significantly faster than anywhere else.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Given that huge difference in growth rates shown in the data, what specific things might be driving that much higher growth in Africa compared to other regions? And thinking bigger picture, what kind of implications could the rapid expansion of a market for a fundamental component like a starter relay signal for economic development and industry trends across that continent? Something to ponder. Okay, let's dive deep. We're looking at something absolutely essential, but maybe easy to overlook, the global starter relay market.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Your car just doesn't start without one.
Exactly.
And our insights today, they're powered by some pretty detailed research from cognitive market research.
Right.
This source gives us a really clear view of, well, what's driving growth, the big challenges, and the trends shaping this little critical part.
So our mission here is to unpack those key dynamics.
Mm.
Whether you're deep in the auto industry, maybe an investor, or honestly just curious about what makes cars tick.
Mm-hmm.
This deep dive should hit the spot. We want to get to the core insights from this report.
Okay, so let's kick off with what's pushing this market forward. The report points first to the steady rise in global vehicle production.
Okay.
But what's really interesting here, and the source highlights this, isn't just the overall number, it's the regional focus. We're seeing big growth spurts in places like Asia Pacific, parts of Africa too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's not all just fancy new passenger cars, is it?
No, not at all.
The report mentions strong, ongoing demand for these relays in commercial vehicles, two-wheelers, motorbikes, scooters,
Right.
which are huge in those developing regions. Growing middle class, big rural areas, they often use those more traditional, robust relay systems.
Exactly. And just beyond the new vehicles, there's the basic need for reliable starting everywhere.
Right.
Harsh weather, unpredictable roads. You just need your vehicle to start.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Weather, unpredictable roads. You just need your vehicle to start every single time. So the starter relay, it's kind of non-negotiable for performance, for safety. That gives us solid baseline demand.
And you can't forget the aftermarket, can you? The replacement parts market.
Oh, absolutely crucial.
The source highlights real momentum there because, well, parts just wear out, don't they?
Yep. A starter relay has a lifespan. Replacing those aging ones creates this constant demand, totally separate from new car sales.
So these basic needs are really fundamental drivers.
That's what the source underscores. They create a stable market even while other tech is shifting.
Well, okay. Alongside that stability, there are some pretty big headwinds. This is where it gets tricky, yeah.
It does. The report flags technological change as a major restraint on the traditional relay market.
How so?
Well, think about start-stop systems, where the engine cuts off at lights.
Yeah, saves fuel.
Right,
Yeah.
but it means way more starting cycles. And then you've got hybrids, full EVs. They often need different kinds of power switching. Sometimes the function gets integrated into bigger electronic units, or they move to solid-state tech.
Okay, hang on. So let's say, what's the difference there for maybe folks not deep in the tech?
Good point. So a traditional relay, think of it like a tiny physical switch. An electromagnet pulls contacts together, click-clack.
Okay.
Solid-state relays use electronic semiconductors. No moving parts.
Oh,
The source highlights they can switch faster, handle those high-frequency demands better, and are often more durable, so they fit well with modern systems, especially EVs.
okay. So the old mechanical relay is potentially getting squeezed out by these newer electronic ones in some areas.
Pretty much, yeah, in certain applications, definitely. And another big restraint the report mentions is, well, market integrity, specifically all the cheap, often low-quality relays flooding the market.
You mean like fakes?
Yeah.
Or just parts that aren't up to scratch?
Both, really. There's the gray market, genuine parts, sold outside authorized channels, and then outright counterfeit junk.
Right.
They kill the price for legit makers, but they fail early, and that can damage the reputation of, good brands or even the vehicle system. The source says this is a big problem, especially in developing countries.
And you add fluctuating raw material prices like copper costs bouncing around.
Yeah.
Puts extra pressure on manufacturers trying to make good, genuine parts affordably. Tough spot.
It really is. But, despite those challenges, the report also points to some interesting trends. The market isn't just sitting there, it's adapting.
Oh, yeah. Like what? How's the humble relay fighting back?
Well, one key trend is integration. Making these relays smarter, basically.
Smarter.
Connecting them better with the vehicle's electronics. Maybe allowing for better diagnostics, sending feedback to the car's computer, more precise control. It's not just a dumb on-off switch anymore.
So it actually communicates a bit.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Becoming part of the network. The report also talks about the continued push for smaller, lighter designs. Miniaturization.
Always trying to shave off weight and space.
Exactly. Fits with the whole industry trend towards more compact, efficient vehicles.
And that shift towards solid state we mentioned, is that a trend in its own right?
Absolutely. While it's a restraint on the traditional market, it's a huge trend overall in power switching,
Yeah.
high-performance cars, EVs. They're adopting them more and more for the speed and durability. The report sees that as a definite growth segment.
Okay. And lastly, I saw the source mention material science. Better materials.
Yes, crucial. Engine bays are hot. So using advanced plastics, tougher metals to make even the traditional relays last longer, handle heat better. That's real innovation too. Shows the old tech isn't standing still either.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've got the starter relay market being pushed by global vehicle demand, especially in certain regions, and for things like two-wheelers and commercial vehicles.
Right.
But it's also getting squeezed by new tech, like start-stop, solid-state relays, plus dealing with fakes and material costs.
Yep, those are the headwinds.
Yet at the same time, it's innovating, getting smarter, smaller, tougher.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, like the source helps us do, it's this complex mix, isn't it? Traditional needs, meeting new tech, performance demands, different things happening in different parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely more dynamic than just a simple switch.
It really is.
Yeah.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over, building on these insights. Given this rapid shift towards advanced electronics and solid-state relays, how will traditional starter relay technology adapt and compete, especially in those markets where cost and getting genuine parts are still really big challenges?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.